The Philadelphia Eagles are 1-0 on the regular season as they're now heading towards a Week 2 clash with the Atlanta Falcons, and they may not be 1-0 by a dominant margin or by obliterating the Redskins, although the second half was certainly close, and there are naturally some questions after a sluggish start again as the Eagles struggled to get going in the first quarter. But this game has some extra zing to it. The Eagles and Falcons, of course, have a very recent history, with the last 3 matchups all going in favour of the Eagles, and the last 2 involving a playoff win, and then the Falcons, who lost to the Eagles in the playoffs, having to watch the Eagles raise a banner on home soil, one they may have felt they should have been listing themselves. So now the Falcons have home turf. There's a lot on the line for a team that is just coming off a loss to Minnesota. This could be an absolute shootout, and this is the video that's going to show you everything an Eagles fan needs to know ahead of the 4th Battle of the Birds in the Doug Peterson era. But before we get started, guys, make sure you leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this sort of content. It would mean the absolute world to myself and all of us here at Philly Sports Network. And as always, make sure you get your daily dose of Philadelphia sports coverage at phillysportsnetwork.com. And don't forget, we will be hosting a live stream once again, breaking down this matchup on Saturday night at 8 PM. That's Prepping the Birds, live with myself and a few of our Eagles writers right here on the Philly Sports Network YouTube channel. So the Atlanta Falcons are always a tricky team, aren't they? I mean, they're 18-17 in their most recent few seasons, and they just haven't seemed to get it together. In a similar fashion to the Eagles, they have been decimated by injuries. The only difference is the Eagles have had the talent and the coaching culture to turn things around, whereas Dan Quinn has recently struggled. And things didn't exactly start out brilliantly last week. After investing heavy assets into the offensive line, first round pick Chris Lindstrom would hit IR after suffering a foot injury and playing 9 snaps on that injury. But the offensive line that was rebuilt couldn't run the ball, couldn't pass block for Matt Ryan, who endured 4 sacks and 7 quarterback hits, and the wheels just fell off the wagon once again. Atlanta's offense stagnated despite the fact they've recently signed Julio Jones to a 3-year contract extension, and looking forward to this Eagles run defense that wiped away the threat of Darius Guice and the Washington backfield, we could well see much of the same. The Redskins did a nice job of chip blocking and making sure the Eagles couldn't get defensive pressure, but I don't think Atlanta are gonna have that same level of luxury, especially against Fletcher Cox. Timmy Jernigan may need to step up in place of Malik Jackson, but that's hardly a downgrade. Jernigan, if he is fully healthy like he flashed against Washington, is more than a problem. And not only that, but if we go back and look at the Falcons' recent history in trying to keep Matt Ryan up, they've just struggled. He was sacked 42 times last season, and in the 2017 playoff meeting, Fletcher Cox had 2 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for a loss, and a sack. And with Chris Lindstrom out, expect there to be plenty of interior pressure. The Eagles are going to have to step up. It's going to be a real battle of the trenches on both sides of the ball. We'll get to the Eagles side of it in a minute, but this Falcons offensive line is going to be red-ringed after having so much investment, so much turnover this offseason, and they still couldn't do anything against a very stout front 7 by Minnesota, and it's arguably comparable to the Eagles front 7 in terms of explosiveness and sheer production from their pass rushers. So it could well be another long day at the office for Matt Ryan, and that is exactly what they need, because other matchups don't exactly bode so well. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and it's an elephant that also just so happens to have 3 heads. One of them belonging to Julio Jones, another to Mohamed Sanu, and the third to Calvin Ridley. And these are the 3 players that the Eagles are going to have to try and contain. Arguably the main question coming out of last week was what happened to the Eagles secondary. Was it schematic? Was it talent? Or was it a mixture of both? And I think you can certainly attribute different plays to different factors. We saw some flashes of production from Ronald Darby. Rasul Douglas drew the start at CB2, but overall they did struggle. They were cushioning 8 to 10 yards off the ball on most plays, and a lot of damage was done underneath, as always is against this Jim Schwartz defense. And you now step into the fray where you've got Calvin Ridley, who had 4 catches for 64 yards, Mohamed Sanu, and Julio Jones, who was targeted 11 times, but mainly on routes underneath for just 31 yards and a touchdown. This is a 3-headed monster, and the thing is that the Eagles got away a couple of times with murder. Case Keenum missed a bomb downfield to Terry McLaurin, and Matty Ice isn't the sort of quarterback to let that opportunity evade him. If there is more miscommunication when the safeties are asked to come down due to pre-snap motion, possession, the Eagles will not get away with those same lapses in concentration, and as a result, these matchups are absolutely imperative. The Falcons are going to have to get the ball out quick because we know how the Eagles pass rush likes to negate that, to storm into the backfield and force Matt Ryan to get it out. We know how the Eagles pass rush likes to play, and as a result, Ryan won't want to end up on his back. Expect plenty of screens, slants and passes to release valves, much like they tried to do to Austin Hooper, who led the team in receiving yards last week with 77. This means that with the Eagles corners playing further back, that they're going to have to come down and make tackles, and if there is one criticism I've had about this team, or more specifically Ronald Darby, it's the sporadic tackling, it's the armbar tackling. There's no consistency to it, and it is a concern if he is going to be matched up against one of the crisper route runners in the league in either Julio Jones or Calvin Ridley. Both players will punish mental mistakes, so if the Falcons are going to work underneath, if they're going to try and beat the Eagles pass rush to the post, get the ball out and aim for yards after the catch, I don't think playing off coverage is going to work. There's going to be a lot of passing yards. We could easily see a combined 700 quarterback passing yards on Sunday, and I do think this is going to evolve into a shootout. The question is, can the Eagles offense keep up with them, and if not, surpass Atlanta? So let's look at this in terms of matchup. I'd assume that Desmond Trufant, the veteran of the group, would shadow Alshon Jeffrey, and that would lead Isaiah Oliver, who's just got a starting role, against Deshaun Jackson. And while I was quite high on Oliver coming out of college, he got worked on by Adam Thielen, who caught a gorgeous 23-yard pass early on, and there were just a couple of other plays where Oliver didn't exactly look brilliant. Safeties Ricardo Allen and Keanu Neal will probably be the key cornerstones here to keep an eye on, especially given how the Eagles love to masquerade their running backs. We didn't know who was going to do what, and whether you're pounding the table to see more Jordan Howard or Miles Sanders or even more Darren Sproles, the one fact remains is that we didn't know what each running back was going to do. We saw Jordan Howard on screens, we saw Sproles up the middle. There was a lot of smoke and mirrors. And for Neal, who's only got one game back under his belt after tearing his ACL last season, this is going to be a test. The Eagles have got to get their running backs involved. What Atlanta struggled to do was run the ball up the middle with Devonta Freeman. The Eagles can't allow that to happen. They've got to keep play outside. Let those bigger receivers like Arcega-Whiteside, like Alshon Jeffrey. Let's not forget you've got two very, very solid blocking tight ends as well as dominant receiving threats as well. Get them involved in opening up this run game, force the ball to the sidelines, and that will in turn open up the middle of the field. But the main player again for the second week in a row has got to be Deshaun Jackson. If he is matched up on Isaiah Oliver, he will be smelling blood in the water like a shark. There is every chance that he can burn Isaiah Oliver down the field to try and pick on that lack of experience, to make sure he gives him a baptism of fire, so to speak, as a starter. We can see the Eagles take some real deep shots. We saw it last week, and even if you've seen a Deshaun Jackson film room, when the Eagles weren't targeting Jackson, his sheer presence and ability to force a corner 10 yards away back down the field opens up those release valves to Zach Ertz, to Nelson Aguilar, so we could even see a bigger game from the guys over the middle. But running the ball, getting those running backs involved on screens is going to be absolutely key to this game. The question is, are Atlanta going to be able to do enough in the secondary to stop the bleeding? Because while they've got quite a veteran pass rush, I'm not sure it's going to be able to get much movement against an Eagles offensive line that really found its rhythm toward the end of last game. And if you look at the spread, if you look at all of the momentum factors coming into this, the only things that Atlanta have going for them, in my opinion, are going to be that it's Matt Ryan in a dome and it's revenge factor at home, and they're 0-1. So they're going to want to get to 1-1 to keep those hopes of a postseason berth alive. The Eagles, meanwhile, are coming in all guns blazing. It's can the offense outscore their offense? And the Eagles defense is going to be the unit that I think holds the X factor here. We know Wentz and the offense can score in buckets when they want to. Whether it's going to be from Miles Sanders, Deshaun Jackson, the tight ends, wherever you look, somewhere is going to be open because of just how much explosive talent this team has. Atlanta, though, looked like a dumpster fire running the ball. The offensive line did not look worthy of the investment, and on defense, it was lapses of concentration, and it was the crispest route runners picking apart younger corners, and this just feels like a continuation of that game. Atlanta are vulnerable, they're wary, they need Matt Ryan and Dan Quinn to step up and and do something, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do it. The Eagles have all the leverage and all the momentum going into this one, guys, but let me know what you think. What are your score predictions? Let me know down in the comments section below, and don't forget, as always, to check out our live stream on Saturday at 8 PM Eastern and your daily dose of coverage for all sorts of pre-game content at phillysportsnetwork.com. From myself, Liam Jenkins, thank you so much for tuning into this video and for reading and watching what we put out. It means the absolute world to us. Enjoy some primetime Eagles football, and we'll see you very soon for some podcasts, Eagles breakdowns, and of course another episode of Eagles Film Room.